This is episode 33 of An Untold Narrative, featuring Devona Stimpson, who I know nothing about because we met on ClubHouse and then we stayed connected. And I loved her energy that she brought. And then I checked out her IG page and it was super colorful and positive and just good messaging. And so I figured I'd reach out to have her on the pod. And Devon, I don't know if you can give yourself what's like your 30-second elevator pitch about yourself.
This is something I'm always like navigating and working out. But basically, I'm an artist. I'm a muralist. I'm the co-founder of a branding boutique called Strive and Grind. I'm also the podcast host of another podcast called the Kickstart Creative Podcast, which is tailored towards creatives as well. And I'm currently based in Houston, Texas. And I specialize mostly in portraiture and figure portraits, mostly female muses. I paint with a lot of different colors, a little bit of abstract, and yeah, it's a little bit about me.
That covers a lot.
I know, it's like a lot put into one nutshell, you know.
I think that's probably why I think we're going to get along really well, because I'm pretty much the same way. Like I can never stick to like one thing and I got to do like a number of different things, but and you have some of your amazing art. So for our listeners on Spotify or Apple or wherever you're listening to podcasts, check out the YouTube so you can see some of her work behind her right now. But let's start with, you mentioned you're in Houston, Texas. I know that you mentioned to me offline that you just moved, but where are you originally from? Like, where'd you grow up? Did you always have an art inclination growing up? Are your parents creative? That's like 15 questions for you all at once.
I got you. I think I could answer all of them and more. So I'm actually originally from Virginia Beach, Virginia. So I'm from the East Coast. I've kind of lived a little bit all over the place. I lived in Pittsburgh, Boston, but I just moved from San Diego. So I lived in San Diego for about 6 years before moving now to Houston, Texas, which I'm super excited about. I pretty much grew up in Virginia on the East Coast. As far as creativity goes, like I've always been creative since I was little, but I never like was into the fine art side of things. It's not like my parents were creative by any means, or at least like they haven't discovered that talent yet. So I don't know where I get my creative talent from. But like I basically had my background mostly in a graphic design background. So when I was in the 4th grade, my cousin showed me how to like code and stuff and create like websites. And so in the fourth grade, I created, in 4th grade. So I was like 9, I guess. And I created my first website. Yeah. So I was like learning HTML and all that stuff. And that really like sparked the love of graphic design for me. And from then on, like I basically taught myself how to do graphic design, web design, even though I didn't know that's what that was called at the time. I just liked creating something and I liked computers and stuff. I mean, my dad was kind of like a tech IT nerd, so he always like taught me stuff with computers. So I was really tech savvy from a really young age. And so I was like creating custom Xanga sites. I don't know if you're familiar with Xanga from back in the day. It was a little bit before MySpace. But I used to create custom like banners and stuff for that. And I would like find other people's Xanga sites and reverse engineer their like layouts. And that's how I kind of learned HTML and a little bit of coding. I would just look at the source code and kind of find what I was looking for. And that's how I learned how to do it. I mean, I don't even think Google was really popping at the time. So I don't even know how
for a time frame perspective, like what years was this?
Time frame perspective was like 2000 to 2005.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, like 5-year span, and
So,
I ended
pretty
up
much like still in like the growing up phases of the internet.
Yes, basically, I guess.
Yeah.
That makes me sound really old.
Well, no, because like I mean, you think about like the internet really hasn't even been around for that long. It's what 25 years, 50 years. It's not that long. And back in the early 2000s, like to your point, like MySpace was a thing when I was in high school in 2005. So but that was like at its infancy, really, of like social media and things like that. So that's crazy that you like adapted yourself at such a young age to like learn these skills that now you still probably use.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I didn't even have Photoshop back then. I used Paint Shop Pro, so it was kind of similar to Photoshop, but it was like cheaper, and that's what I saw other people were using. And I remember begging my dad to buy me the software, and of course he did, and I would absolutely have fun with it. And when MySpace came out, I started creating like custom layouts for MySpace. So my MySpace always looked different from everybody else's. And that eventually led people asking me to create MySpace layouts for them. So it's kind of like how my freelancing journey started out without
And
me
you
even
charged?
knowing. I think I charged for like a couple, but most of it I just kind of like did because I like doing it.
Totally.
And nobody really told me, like my parents aren't like entrepreneurial, so they didn't really think to tell me, to do it. I didn't have anybody entrepreneurial in my life to tell me like, oh, you should charge for this. It was just kind of like, sure. But I used to also do like custom like painted t-shirts and stuff, which I charged for some of those. So I kind of did like little creative things.
You've really always been an entrepreneur.
I guess so. I mean, when I was younger, I used to do like lemonade stands and sell brownies on the corner of the street, like a lot of
So you grew up
backstories. Yeah. I mean, I was always just like, I had ideas and I like to go after them. And I wasn't really too afraid to put myself out there, I guess, so to speak. And, people used to like know me as the girl with they would say like, hey, you're the girl with the dope MySpace. And I didn't even know who they were. Like I'd just be in the mall with my friends, like hanging out like teenagers did. And then like random people would say that to me like, oh, this is pretty cool.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's early.
Yeah, that's really early. And I ended up like doing it's like a vocational program. So my junior and senior year of high school, I attended like a community college for half the day. It was like a program they had with the public school system. And I was in this digital art class. And so that's where I got to learn how to use like an Apple computer and all the Adobe suite and just what more of what graphic design and web design is and like the career of it, so to speak. So that's kind of like really where I learned a lot. And my teacher, he was like my mentor and he helped me get like an internship there at that program, working at the college or the community college. And so that's kind of like where I kind of learned most of the stuff. So I was really self-taught. And of course I went to college for it. But when I got to college, I didn't really like learn anything new. And the graphic design program wasn't that great there. And long story short, one of my friends who was like in the graphic design program, we were like battling, like it was like registration time. We were like battling for the last spot in this like graphic design class that we both needed. And if you didn't get in, or if I didn't get in, I would have had to waited like a year or two to actually get into the program. And I was like, can I curse on your podcast?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, fuck that. I'm not going to be in college for an extra like year or two. Like I wanted to get out of college like 3 to 4 years. And so I was like, well, she got the spot. She beat me. And I just remember being so pissed because I was like, I'm the one that like has always wanted this, like this is who I am. And she was just like, didn't really care as much about it as I did. And I just remember being so bummed, but I also knew that like things happen.
Wait, you didn't get it?
I did not get that spot.
Oh.
Like we were literally in the classroom, like we had our laptops out or we looked at the clock and then we tried to get it and she beat me to it. But it was like a blessing in disguise because like I said, I was like, I'm not staying in college longer than I need to. I even did like summer classes and stuff so I could speed up the process. So I ended up switching from graphic design to drawing and design, which forced me to take more fine art classes, like painting classes, drawing classes, screen printing, sculpture, all of that, which is really cool. And then that's where I like fell in love with painting, taking in the painting class and realizing like, oh, this is cool. Like I always looked at fine art and said like, oh, like I love street art. I love this. Like, I think I could do that possibly, but it wasn't something that I really wanted to do. Cause I was just like, graphic design is my thing. Like, that's what I'm about. And then like, I was like, I actually hate graphic design. Like I hate working with like clients and I hate doing that kind of work. And I love the creative freedom that painting allows me to have. And so that's kind of like where I decided to focus more on that and kind of put graphic design on the back burner.
So you have a degree in drawing and illustration?
Drawing and design. So it's a bachelor's degree in fine arts with a concentration in drawing and design.
Gotcha. Okay. That's a complete shift after doing graphic design and computer generated design essentially. For most of your youth. And so what year did you graduate college? And then what was your first job out of college?
Yeah, so I graduated in December 2012.
Okay.
And my first job out of college was not in graphic design. And it was actually struggling to find like good graphic design positions because a lot of the graphic design things that I was finding either I was like too qualified or like it was just hard to get into. And basically my husband, we had got married right before. He was my high school sweetheart. So we've been together for like 15 years this year.
Oh
So
my
we went
God.
to college together. We graduated college together. We went to separate high schools. But anyways, he actually landed a really good program with a Fortune 200 company, which is why like I lived in Pittsburgh and Boston. So it was like a 2-year rotation, 1 year in Pittsburgh, 1 year in Boston. And so I ended up having to go to Boston or Pittsburgh with him literally 3 months after we graduated. So it was kind of like, okay, now I got to find a job specifically, in
In
Pittsburgh.
a new city. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was waiting tables, like most people were in college, and I waited tables for 7 years of my life. And so I ended up just having to stick to just waiting tables when I lived in Pittsburgh. I did freelance graphic design. So I was always like still doing some side stuff. But also me and my husband, that was when we had originally founded our what is now branding company called Strive and Grind. But at the time it was like a lifestyle brand. And we were like, listening to podcasts, reading books, and like really getting inspired about things that weren't being taught to the millennial generation. And so we created like a blog. That's where it started out essentially. And we ended up kind of like building that as I was working part-time as a waitress and as he was working in corporate America.
Do you still have that blog? And when you say that it turned into like a lifestyle brand, like were you making clothing or like what were you doing with it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That company has been such a journey. So it was just like, it was a blog where we talked about like creativity, if you wanted to be a skateboarder, a doctor, a lawyer, an artist, whatever, like if you strive and grinded, like you were a strive and grinder. It stands for strive to achieve greatness and grind to get there. And so we were like publishing articles. We even had like guest writers come on and share. I did like a 30-day squat challenge post on there for like our fitness category, and it like went viral. And we got to a point where we got like 30,000 impressions or views a month, visitors on our website,
On a
which was really
blog.
crazy. Yeah, on a blog.
That's
But
wild.
we didn't, it's crazy. We didn't know that much about business or about monetizing a blog or things like that. So now like looking back, like we would totally do things differently. But yeah, so like we were building that up. We like started a college chapter for Strive and Grind. We were throwing events. We had sponsored athletes and brand ambassadors, and we had like a clothing line. We had all these like
what
cool,
was like the
things.
core thing you like offered services for?
That's a very good question. So it wasn't really offering services. It was more just like a lifestyle brand. Like we had the clothing line. We wanted people to be part of it was like a movement. It was more so like a movement. That's how we identified it. And like people wore our gear. They took pictures. Like we did photo shoots. Like I said, we did all of that, but we weren't making any money. We had something really cool, but we weren't making any money. And that's
So you were a nonprofit.
Basically a not-for-profit. Basically, yeah. I mean, we made like very, very little money with the clothing line, and to anybody that's listening, I know a lot of creatives want to do clothing, and it's really one of the hardest businesses you could start. And let me, by all means, don't let me destroy your dream, but like it is hard and it's very
Especially
expensive.
like the screen printing side or like the hoodie game.
Yeah.
There's so many options out there.
Yeah. And we literally like put like inventory on our credit card. So we held inventory in our apartment, and like literally before we moved here to Houston, which was beginning of this year, like we still had inventory like in our closet that we would give to some of our now branding clients. But I ended up just like posting on Facebook like, hey, we still have some gear if anybody wants some, like sold like $300 of it pretty quickly, and then just kind of donated the rest to a shelter. Like literally we had this clothing since like 2013, 14, and we've had like a bunch of inventory on hand since then. So thousands and thousands of dollars worth of apparel.
And that business of your and your husband's, that still exists.
Yes, so
But
that does
it's
still
profitable
exist.
today.
It's profitable today. I mean, we had a pivot. So it was kind of like, we always like wanted to come to California. I mean, anybody who's on the East Coast, I'm sure like California is always like a dream to everybody. You think of palm trees or whatever. And a lot of the people that we got inspired by, like that we listened to on podcasts and stuff, lived in San Diego. And we knew that there was a lot of millennial like online business owners like killing it in San Diego. And so we're like, man, that's like where we need to be. Well, his company ends up buying out a company that's in Carlsbad, California, which is in San Diego. And so he was like already networking with like the top VPs and stuff through his program. So he was like, well, what if I can, get them to move us to California. And so basically he made that happen. He like talked to some people and then they were like, yeah, we can get you in the, you know, the IT department out there at the Carlsbad location. So instead of spending a year in Boston, we ended up leaving 6 months in and moving to California. And it was just like, we just felt like it was a sign. It was a dream come true for us. So it's like, we never had been to California, but we knew we always wanted to go. We knew this is like how we were going to grow our business. And basically it was kind of like a sign, because when we did move there, we saw like a Facebook ad for this entrepreneurial event. And the guy that we like listened to a lot on podcasts, he was actually speaking at this event. And I was like, oh, this has to be a sign. John Lee Dumas for Entrepreneur on Fire. He used to be like one of the top, well, he still is a top podcast, but he's like an OG podcaster. You should check it out. He interviews like all different like types of entrepreneurs and stuff. Me and my husband actually eventually got interviewed on his podcast, which was really cool.
Sick.
Yeah. And it was just cool. So we saw that. We saw he was speaking at the conference. We were like, we gotta go to this conference. And it was like a $47 refundable ticket, you know, and we were like, oh, that's like so much money, but it's refundable. So if we don't like it, like we can get our money back. And then literally $47.
That's not a lot.
I know, but for us, not making any money and just not in that mindset yet, like fully in that mindset, like kind of just iffy.
To me, that just describes your mindset of like, we can't even lose $47 if we don't get that much value out of it. Like that's the strive and grind mentality, is like, we're not gonna waste any dollar.
Yeah, because we already wasted so much money on the clothing line.
I know that story.
Yeah, so we go to this conference and like we're like crossed our arms and we're like, man, they're probably gonna try to sell us something. Literally by day 2, we're like whispering in each other's ears, and by day 3, of course, they sold something, and it was a $36,000 mastermind and business coaching program for a whole year, and we bought into it, and it was literally the turning point for us. So we basically did that investment, which we didn't have. We put it all on credit cards. We were just like, all right, we're going to go on. Like, this was a sign. Like, we have no plan B. Like, we have to make this work. We literally have to start making $3,000 a month, at least, to like pay off the program, because that's how much it costs a month.
It was
to pay
how
off
much?
The program. $36K total.
Oh my
$3K
God.
a month. Yes. Which is typical in the business coaching mastermind world.
Okay, because I had no idea. That sounds like an astronomical amount.
It is it is when you're not in that world. But it's actually,
so folks are aware. We just went from $47 to $36. Yes.
I know, we was tripping about 47 and dropped at least $3K that day. But oh my God. Yeah. So it was definitely a big leap, but like I said, we just knew it was worth it. And we learned about like good debt versus bad debt at the event. And that was like a really big eye opener for us. And like I said, if we came to California to like make it. And so we put all like our big foot forward. And like I said, we put on credit cards. We knew we had like 3 months to at least try to like get to $3K a month. And so when we met with our business coach, he was just like, man, you guys have something cool going on, but like, it's kind of hard to tell what you guys do, but you guys are really good at creating websites and brands. So you should do branding and you should brand other entrepreneurs. And we were like, okay. And that's how Strive and Grind became a now branding company that it is today. And it was really crazy at the time because for me, like I said, like I fell in love with painting. And I started to really like hate graphic design. And like, even when I was in Boston, it was really hard for me to balance like painting and like trying to build Strive and Grind. I kind of got in this really depressed state. I mean, you live in Massachusetts, so I don't know how you live there, but I really hated it there. It was really depressing because it's always cloudy and murky and cold. We
just got out of February, and it was one of the hardest months I think I've ever lived in 29 years. Like it was a very low month for myself, like just creative wise, just motivation wise, just, you know, everything going on in the world. And it was just, as soon as March hit and we got a 60-degree day at the beginning of March, and it's like, oh,
hallelujah.
The leprechauns came out or something. It's like,
oh man,
I honestly like the 4 seasons. I like the change because it keeps you on your toes. like California is a little different because like you get the polar opposite is like you get
Yeah.
all sun all the time. And
Yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
it gets cold and gloomy there sometimes, but not anything compared to
Yeah.
the Northeast.
But yeah, no, I feel you on the tough months of especially being creative.
Yeah. And, when he said to do the branding company, I was like, oh, that means I have to go back to doing and focusing graphic design. But in the moment, that last day at the event, when we decided to pull the trigger on this investment, I told him, I told my husband that I was just like, okay, I'm turning my switch on. I'm going all in on Strive and Grind. I'm going to put my painting, I'm going to put everything on the back burner because this is what's going to take us to where we want to be the fastest as far as, financial freedom and just freedom in general. And so I was like, all right, just do whatever it takes. And so we did that. Like we literally hustled, like we strive and grind. Like that was like how we lived. Didn't sleep a lot. Wasn't in the best health and mindset wise, but we hustled and we built a branding company. And it was cool because for those of you listening, a mastermind is typically anybody can start a mastermind. The idea of it was started by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. He wrote that book. It's a very famous book for a lot of entrepreneurs or in the success book world. And so it's basically like 2 or 3 people come together that want to have like a like-minded goal and they want to succeed and achieve that. And you kind of hold each other accountable. That's like what a mastermind is in a nutshell. And there are tons of masterminds out there that you can form or that are like free, but we found that the value in investing in a mastermind, $36,000 to be specific, is that yes, it's a lot of money, but it's just kind of like you're investing in like a college education and you're investing in a group of people that also paid this $36,000. So everybody is kind of at this next tier level, of entrepreneurship. Everybody has money. Everybody is like willing to learn and put their best foot forward. And so a lot of our first branding clients came from this mastermind. So that was kind of like how we were able to kind of start and build our business. So we were like started to brand some of the people in our mastermind, and like we continuously went to conferences and stuff. We ended up joining another mastermind from a speaker that was at the first conference that we thought was really cool. And that was a $20,000 mastermind. And that helped us catapult our business even more because he had a different level of people in that group, which was pretty freaking awesome. So a lot of our,
It's
go
just
ahead.
risk and reward, right? It's like
Yes.
you guys put your necks on the line and now you get to, have a little bit of financial freedom. To your point, it's like people can't expect opportunities if you don't put yourself out there. That's like the most important thing. Like that's the beautiful part of the internet. If you don't put anything out there, how are people going to present you opportunities?
Exactly. I mean, putting yourself out there and doing the work. Because mind you, yes, there was like 90 of us that bought into this program, the 36K one. But me and my husband and maybe like 6 other people in that group were like the top performers, and like a lot of the other people, like people were dropping out,
Oh yeah.
people weren't like succeeding. Yeah. So it also is a testament too to like what you're like what work you're willing to put in. And even for us, it wasn't like all easy. Like in the beginning, like I think when we got to that 3rd month, we were making some money, but we weren't quite making that consistent 3K a month minimum that we needed. And like it was Thanksgiving, I think. Yeah, it was around Thanksgiving time. I just remember like the 3K got taken out of our personal account, and that was like our money to pay for like bills, and rent was due the next day. And this was Thanksgiving time, and we were like freaking out, and we were like, oh, like what are we gonna do? And like my husband had to call like our business coach and like work something out. And obviously like we got our money back and got to kind of work something out with him. But we just remember from that moment, like we can never let this happen again. We can never have our backs against the wall like this again. And that really like drove us to like work even harder and like think a little bit smarter on how we could make more money. Cause at the time we were just thinking like only working online, but what became our bread and butter was really just kind of like the organic growth of it and really like talking to people and meeting and people in person. And that's how we were able to get like those conversations and sales conversations going. And that kind of like helped build our business. So yeah, that's kind of like the backstory of Strive and Grind and how it got to where it is today. And eventually we made the goal. We moved to California that March. We had made a goal to quit our jobs a year from moving. And literally a year from moving, so March 15th, 2015, we moved to California. March 2016, we both put our 2 weeks in for our day jobs.
Wow.
And quit our day jobs. And it was pretty awesome. And it's not like, it was still, we were risk takers. Like we only had $8K in the bank account for 2 people to live in Southern California, but we had enough people in the pipeline to make us feel comfortable with doing that. And then also we had closed like a $10,000 deal that day or $11,000 deal that day. And it was just like, you know, like signs and blessings and opportunities that just made us know that that was like the right decision. And then from there, we made our like first 6 figures within a year after that. And we ended up getting like our own office in downtown San Diego, which was cool.
Wow.
And then, yeah, I mean, it was a pretty awesome ride. We got a lot of clients. We were speaking on stages, you know, getting interviewed on podcasts and all that stuff. And it was really cool, but it wasn't all like unicorns and rainbows by any
No, of
means.
course. Like you got to put the work in still. You know,
Yeah,
they say like the the reward of hard work is more work.
exactly. You know, and growing a business, and especially as creatives, you feel like you want to have control over everything. And we had to learn, during our process of like, we need to outsource, we need to delegate. Like we don't want to be working on the business as much as we were. We want to be working in it. Like I said, we were striving and grinding, working day and night, doing all the branding, like designing the websites, designing everything, doing all the strategy calls and blah, blah, blah. And like, we had to like learn how to find people to help us, create these brands too. So now we have like, people that we work with to help build brands for our clients. So it's not all just us doing everything.
That's incredible. That's so awesome. And I'm assuming that today. Well, let me ask you. I'm gonna jump ahead. I'm gonna go backwards to like art specifically, but like
Perfect.
today, like, are you and your husband like happy? Are you guys like totally stoked on where you guys have? What have you got to? Like, it sounds like it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be crazy and ungrateful not to be happy. Where we've gotten to today. And like I said, it hasn't been all rainbows and unicorns. Like literally 2 years of the business, I wasn't in the business. And that was because like I got to a point where I got depressed. And like I just remember waking up every day like just crying because I like hated, like I said, remember I said like I loved painting. I didn't want to do graphic design, but I made that sacrifice to create this company, to create the freedom that we wanted, which we had gotten. But then it got to the point where I just kept putting myself and the things I wanted to do on the back burner. And then I just got depressed, and like I would wake up crying every day and just like crying about random things. And I was just in a really dark place. And so I had to kind of make the decision, like, I think I should leave, like step away from, the end grind of Strive and Grind. And kind of had to put the weight on my husband's shoulders with that, because it was like affecting our relationship and our marriage. And, it was either like the business or our marriage and like my happiness. And like, it's just like, all right, if we don't do something now, like this is going to be really bad.
Totally.
So I had to like do therapy. I had to just read a lot of books, listen to a lot of podcasts, just all of that. And it took probably about like 1 to 2 years to fully feel like I got back to myself. And so I would say over the past year, I stepped back into Strive and Grind, and now I'm more involved in it. My husband now also has like a business coaching and consulting company and like a podcast, and I help him with a little bit of that stuff too. And then I'm stepping back, full focus on my art now, because I kind of just been painting on and off because Strive and Grind takes up a lot of time and focus. And then, having that period of depression was just hard to focus on anything at all. So now I'm just like, I feel like I'm at a really good place. He feels like he's at a great place. We just moved to Houston, and we just feel like it's a fresh new start. I just turned 30, so I feel like this is a new chapter. Like, we want to eventually have a family. We want to invest in real estate. We want to like, do all the things even better, bigger and better. So yeah, definitely happy and proud of where we are today.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, you should be. I mean, you guys have both gone through stuff that most people probably haven't. So, I mean, you tested both time and your relationship and your personal strengths. I mean, that's really, really challenging. And I'm happy that, hey, listen, new decade of life, new chapter, and giddy up and create some beautiful things, right? And
yeah.
so you talked about, your love of art, and pretty much that's how we met in a clubhouse room that was around art, right? And so people are talking, and you know, you have these beautiful works behind you, and like, do you what's your goal with art? Is it more of a personal thing because you personally love it, or is it like I'm trying and have goals to sell, or do you do commissions? Like, talk about how that influences your life and what your strategy is with it.
Yeah, so definitely selling, definitely want it to make this like a career and focus for me. I'm planning on doing, well, I want to do more murals. Like I've done murals, but I want it to be more of a on a consistent basis. I do commissions. And you know, like I really want people to know me for my artwork. I want people to know me as an artist and as a muralist. And I really want to have my work in, it's not really like galleries or anything. Like I feel like I'm more driven towards like the independent route where like I create a fan base and following and collector base, you know, people, even if it's a small group, and like I can drop, you know, exclusive limited releases of things, of originals or prints, and you know, I can do licensing deals with big companies and create products and designs for big companies. And so that's kind of like where I kind of see it going, and eventually having like my own like pop-up, you know, shows, like touring around. Like I want to do that. Even eventually having my own storefront where it's like storefront and then like gallery space possibly for people to rent out, and then having my studio there. Like I've always wanted to have something like that. So yeah, there's lots of big things that like I want, but I just know since I've been so inconsistent with it, I just got to like stay focused, be consistent, create the work, connect with people, you know, and just keep striving and grinding, essentially, kind of like full circle, and just focus on that.
So what percentage of time do you like paint, like in the work week, right? Like, is
Mm-hmm.
it like 3 days, like is it 30% of your time? Is it a couple hours a day? Like, or is it whenever you're feeling it?
That's a good question. It's kind of like an all the above answer, but I try to paint at least I try to paint every day, you
Oh
know,
wow.
even if it's like 30 minutes. I like to at least a minimum of 30 minutes or to an hour. It's hard for me. Like I hate knowing like just 10 minutes of painting. Like I'm just like having to pour the paint out, and like I feel like I'm wasting paint, you know, the whole process. So I like to try to paint every day. I don't always do that, but I try to do that, especially now since I literally just moved to Houston and we just started getting back into the swing of things and the grind and just getting settled literally a week ago. So I'm working on a piece right now that I'm really excited to see how it turns out. And so I would say a little bit of all the above, but I'm really trying to discipline myself to paint at least once a day. Doesn't really matter the time. What matters is that I'm doing it.
That's, yeah, no, definitely that consistency is really key. And you do it within your new home, right? Like you don't have a
Yes.
studio.
Yeah, it's our like dining room is like my studio space.
There's pros and cons to that, right? The pro is like you could just walk over and be like, I'm putting in my 30 minutes versus like
Yes.
having to drive somewhere, walk somewhere, or do something else like externally.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a pro to that. The downside is it's your dining room table or your dining room.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have like a dining room table, so it's just like it's like my studio, you know.
Um,
So it works out. I mean, eventually I would like to have like a separate studio or loft space, you know. That'll be something down the road, but I don't mind having like an intimate space in my home.
Nice. Talk about a little bit about your podcast and how long have you been doing it, what its like goals are. It sounds probably similar to what I'm trying to do to some degree, but you know, maybe just deep dive, you know, a little bit about it.
Yeah, for sure. So my podcast is called the Gangstar Creative Podcast. And basically it blossomed. It was like an idea I had for a really long time. Like I've had it on the back burner for 4 years. And it wasn't until COVID, like quarantine, that I was like, all right, I'm going to make this shit happen. Like this has to happen. I don't have any excuse. And I think that worked out for a lot of people as far as like, you know, having ideas come to fruition during the time where we all were locked in our houses.
Yeah.
So I basically had this idea because I know that a lot of creatives struggle with the business side of their business. And there's so many ways to be a successful creative because there's so many different industries. There's also just so many ways to be independent now. There's not like how it used to be like the traditional way of like galleries and agents and all of that stuff. Like you can still do that, but there's social media now and there's all these different things. And so I know that I have a lot of business acumen from my experience in the business space with the branding company, and even in the online business space, just having the network that I've had and the experiences that I've had with the masterminds and conferences that I've been to. And I remember going to it was like an art showcase in LA, and it was curated by like a female Instagram artist, and she like gathered all these female Instagram artists and put them into the showcase in LA. So it was a pretty dope idea. And I went to it because a girl that I had followed for a while showcased there. And so me and my husband go there and we walk in, and there's probably like maybe 20, 25 people showing, you know, and they have their little booth or whatever table set up. And as me and my husband are walking through this venue, either no one's at their booth, or if they are at the booth, they're like sitting on the ground, like on their phone, or they're at their booth, they don't say anything to us. And I'm just like, what? Like, I was getting like really livid and furious, because I was like, this is why artists are like the starving artists, and like they're not successful, and why they're complaining about not making money. And, you know, if you don't want it, then why are you even here? Like, I was just like enraged, and I was just like, there's only one person that spoke to us. I didn't really care for her stuff, but I appreciated her like walking through her booth and like her showing us her things. I was like, finally somebody that like cares about, you know, the business side of their art and like trying to make it. And so like it really made me so upset. Like, I remember like tears were in my eyes, because I was just like, this is the issue. Like, I really hate that this is a problem. And so I wanted to like annihilate the status quo of the starving artist. And that's kind of like why I created Gangstar Creative. It was to bring on guests, successful creatives from all different types of industries, and not only share their journey, but like pull the curtain behind on their business and ask them like the ins and outs of their business. Like, how much do you charge? What is the most money you have made on like painting a mural? Because some people don't even know like it's possible to make more than $500 to paint a mural, you know? And it's just like things like that, like just the exposure of what's possible, and knowing like the technicalities and logistics behind how everyone kind of operates their business. There wasn't really anything, or there really isn't anything like that out there. We can talk about our craft all day. We can hear about people's stories and journeys, but the questions always still pop up in our minds like, well, that's cool, but like, how did that happen? Or how did they get that job? How did they get that opportunity? How did they get that client? Like, what is that? How do you do that? And so I felt like it was important for me to just kind of step up and be a leader in that way. And the podcast was kind of like my first step in doing that, and bringing on successful creatives in different industries and interviewing them and having them really pull back the curtain on their businesses. So I launched it last April. So I guess it's almost been a year since I've had it, and it's been going good pretty far. And I've had some amazing guests. I feel really lucky and blessed to have the people that I've had on. So yeah, it's been a pretty cool journey.
That sounds almost identical to why I did this.
Really?
In regards to timing, I think it was April or May that I started this as well. It was like, again, I've had this idea of like, why can't we have these honest, vulnerable conversations of the people who are like hustling and grinding on the day to day, whether they're working for themselves or working for a company, and what it takes, and like to share those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you're the 33rd episode. I've skipped a few weeks here and there just due to like burnout or other things. So
Yeah.
it's not a perfectly consistent thing, but I'm super happy that even my second guest, Atticus Radley, he's a photographer out of New York. And he's like, dude, if you get to 100 episodes, I'm buying you a nice bottle of champagne. And that was enough motivation for me to get
Oh, snap. Well, you're like 30% there. So
That's it. Right? So a couple more years.
yeah. Or if you just amp it up, maybe you find yourself wanting to do more episodes. I don't know. For me, I feel you though, because I release podcasts, or try to, every week, usually
Right.
on Mondays. There were sometimes I do like solo episodes. Well, then I might do like 2 a week. But it's just like harder for me to do that and then edit it.
Yeah, I've only done 2. I did a prelude when I launched it, and then after season 3, I did like a one-on-one episode, but it was much shorter. But like maybe I can interject more of those when I have something really stirring on my mind. But yeah, no,
yeah, you should totally do it.
yeah, I don't know. I'm always like, I don't like talking about myself, or like, I don't know. I'd rather highlight somebody else,
No,
but
I feel you. I feel the same way. But you would be surprised like what people can learn from you. And I know you probably have a plethora of information. And my husband always gets on me too, because he has a podcast as well. And he's always like, you need to do more solo episodes. I'm like, I just like interviewing people and hearing people's stories. He's like, no, people want to hear from you. I'm like,
it's true.
okay.
Talk about some of your, like, you hinted at like some of your goals of like opening a storefront and like some things like that. Like, how far in advance do you actually look when you start thinking about personal goals or financial goals, or maybe you don't, because even like COVID, I think, has slapped a lot of people's 5-year plans in their face, being like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So like, how do you set these goals for yourself, you and your husband, or just personally, or like, what are they?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I always like to dream big, and kind of work from there. We've found, it's best to kind of work in 12-week like runs, like quarterly,
Okay.
because it's easier to focus on quarterly goals and getting things done and kind of focusing that as like it's just more like attainable.
Sure.
And my husband's the one that really pushed that on to me, because there's a book called The 12-Week Year. I
Okay.
believe that's what it's called. And so it like focuses on that, where it's like the 12 weeks is like, look at that as your year. Because a lot of times we're like, okay, this year I want to do like these things. And then like maybe one of them gets done. But if you focus on like 3 to 4 things in like that one quarter, like you can get, that 4 times done in your year. And so that's kind of like how I look to do that. But I know for me, one of my big goals now that I've finally, I mean, it kind of sucks, as the first quarter was kind of like thrown away because it was just like the move.
Yeah.
And so now I'm just kind of getting back into the swing of things, but I really want to do more like mural outreach and kind of get more murals booked. Like I want to get at least like, I want to get 2 murals booked a month, but we'll see how that goes.
That's
But
really big.
yeah, I know. I mean, at least 1, but I'd love to get 2.
It's
I think it's
attainable.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
So
So
can you share some, like, 'cause, I don't think I've had artists on. I don't think I've had a muralist on, but like, talk about that process, right? Like, what does that look like? What is it you mentioned outreach? Like, are you just DMing
mhm.
people, hey, let me do a mural on your building?
Yeah, good question. So it's kind of the same for even just paintings, because before I was like wanting to do murals and doing murals, I still did outreach. And that's basically just like cold emailing, cold DMs. And I reach out to people. I just either find people via like hashtags, specific hashtags of like industries or businesses that I want to work with, or types of influencers I want to work with. And I have like a message typed out in like a flow of like how I navigate that conversation, and then I send them that. I There was like a point where I was like really trying to push live painting, because sometimes I do live painting at events, and so I actually had gotten this like whole list of like event planners, and I would like send out a ton of cold emails, outreach to all these event planner business owners to see if they would be interested or had clients that wanted live painting at their events. So that's basically like a big key of trying to get my name out there in the beginning, until it comes like people just come to me. That's the goal. And so even like in my podcast, like I've interviewed a lot of painters and artists, and a lot of them, they get their work from people coming to them. But in the beginning, it was more just like being consistent and doing the work, which I haven't, And so for me, I'm like, okay, I just need to be consistent, do the work, and then people are going to eventually come to me. But I also have to hustle my ass off and put my name out there and like let people know that this is what I do and this is what I can do. And so that's basically how I've been able to get work, is just doing outreach. But a lot of it also has been word of mouth, just people knowing that I do paint and I do portraiture type of artwork and colorful artworks, and then they'll reach out to me, either DM or email, and then we kind of just go from there. So that's kind of like how it's been mostly.
And when you were doing that, and maybe you still do a little bit of it, like, are you successful, or like, talk about like, what's the success rate of somebody even responding?
Oh yeah. I mean, most of the time they don't respond. I don't know what the average is. When I was doing it really hardcore, I had like a spreadsheet which I need to redo again. And I'd probably get the magic's in the follow-up. So usually I would get more of a response after like the second or third follow-up, you know, and then I'd rather get a response saying no than no response at all,
Right.
you know, or like, even if it's just like later, like, oh, not right now, but later. And so then I'd make a note like, okay, well, when's later? Like March, or, you know, a couple months from now, and they'll be like, yes or no. So then I make sure that I mark in my calendar to follow up with
Yeah,
so-and-so, you know, in 2 months or whatever. So, I mean, the success rate isn't like 100%, you know, but that's just like any business. You get 10 no's and maybe one turns into a yes, and that yes could be, you know, a really big commission or a big mural or a sale or anything, a connection or a referral. So it's just like, the more you do that, the more that will come to you. And then
totally.
I also just kind of believe the power of like momentum. So as you like start doing stuff, you'll start seeing things come to you. And so I just remember like when I was really doing that a lot, I would get more opportunities started to come to me. So it's just kind of like, once you get in that flow and you keep that momentum going and that consistency going, then opportunities start to just start coming to you.
Totally. If you had one thing to tell anybody as like a piece of advice, or, you know, a motivational, I mean, you talked about public speaking, and you speak super, super well, and you're able to like,
Oh, thanks.
you know, gather your thoughts really coherently. Like what's like one piece of advice that you find yourself consistently giving of recent time, or, you know, repeated questions that you're getting from audiences, and, you know, how are you educating, whether that's youth or other people who have been struggling or anything like that?
Oh, that's a good question. And I always find this hard because there's just so many like things that I've learned over the years. But the thing that I always end up coming back to is just consistency with anything. I always just tell people that are new or that are struggling, like it all just comes down to consistency. Because even when we were doing Strive and Grind, the lifestyle brand, before it was a branding company, like we had a YouTube channel. We used to vlog, do daily vlogs, or weekly vlogs, not daily. We weren't that ambitious, but like, but we were never consistent. And I can only imagine, and this was like in 2000, like 13, 14, when like, you know, Viners were popping up, and like that's when like the influencer age was really starting to like actually become something. And so I can only imagine like if we actually like stuck to that, like where like what that could have led to, you know. And then even just like, you know, and anything in our businesses, like if you're not consistent, nothing's going to happen, and no one's going to know you for doing that thing or doing that one thing really well. And so I think it's like just comes down to that consistency and that momentum. And also just like, you have to trust the process, because I think with social media, there's so much out there that can make you feel insecure or doubt yourself, where it's just like, oh, I'm not where I want to be, or like, damn, this person got this like dope ass Lamborghini in this house, like, you know, like those really crazy marketers, or just like, man, that person got a solo show, or like they got this brand deal. It's like, here I am, but not that, but I'm doing something. Or you're like, you know, hustling day in, day out. You don't feel like you're not getting it. And it's just like, things don't happen overnight, and people on social media only show you what they want to show you. And typically it's the end result, you know? And so you have to just kind of remind yourself, like, they, you know, had to work and hustle, and they are having days that you're having just like the day you're having right now. And that's okay. And that's just part of the process. Things don't happen overnight. Even for me with Strive and Grind, like it wasn't the successful branding company it is today. It started out as like, you know, what I shared, just this lifestyle brand with all these things, with a clothing brand that wasn't making any money, like, you know. And so I think it's just like, you have to trust the process and be willing to kind of make those sacrifices in the beginning to get it to where it needs to be, and just kind of do the damn work and just trust that things are going to happen, because no one's going to believe in you more than yourself.
Yeah.
And no one's going to make it happen other than you. So
That's so true, and really powerful. I remember like early February, again, February is a tough month in general. Like I was doing like 8 or 9 different things and juggling all these things all within each week. And then on top of that, like end of January is when I like joined ClubHouse or whatever, like middle of January. And I was trying to listen to consume everything, insert myself and all these conversations. And like, then it was distracting, and I wasn't able to work on all these things. And like, it was causing me such anxiety. And then I was hearing all these popular success stories and I'm like, why isn't it happening to me? I'm doing all these things.
Yes.
See what you're talking about, right? And then you enter the game of NFTs and all this other crap, and it's like it's, it's overload.
It
We're
is. I'm like trying to get caught up.
such an information society where it's like it's so hard to focus and be really good and consistent, as you say, when we're so distracted by everyone else's crap, where it's so important to just step back, realize what's most important for you and impactful for you. Even like what I love is I reached out to you, over a month ago, and you're like, man, I can't do this right now. Like I'm moving, like
Yeah.
like being able to say no is such a good place, like for self-aware, like, and like being able to do that and understand, like, I didn't do it Clubhouse for like a week. I was like, okay, it's too much. It's taken over your
I
life.
was off of it for like 2 to 3 weeks because of the move, and it was just like, oh, this is just so much.
Yeah, you said that. Like it's really great, but like when it starts doing the other side of the spectrum where it's consuming too much of your time and taking away, it's like we got to take a step back.
Yeah. And then even like for me, something that kind of helps me when I'm in those sort of like funks. This doesn't work obviously if someone's younger than you, but I always look at the people that like are where I want to be, or like are that, has this awesome post that they just posted. And then I look at how old they are. And then I think about, okay, well, I'm 30, they're like 33. So what were they doing at 30? And they were like just doing this. And then that actually like brings a calm to me, makes me feel a lot better, because I'm like they're basically where I am right now, and like that could be me in 3 years. So like it's like okay. So that's something also to think about, like when you see somebody where you want to be and it's kind of like making you feel insecure, like defeated. It's like, well, also think about like how long they've been doing this, or like how old they are, and like everybody's journey is so different. And so that always kind of like helps me kind of navigate through that, because I'm just like, oh, like, well, when they were like my age, they weren't even doing this yet. So I still like I can still do this type of thing. So
Yeah, that's great insight. I think I'm gonna try to use that technique.
you should, yeah. Because even when I interview people, like most of the time they're older. I even interviewed somebody. She was like, she didn't become like a successful like artist until she was in her 50s, and that was like really inspiring. And I'm just like, and she like killing it now, and I'm just like, oh wow, like when she was my age, she was still like doing this other business, so who knows like what your future is going to hold for you. And it's kind of just reminding, like, this is your own path and your own journey. You're going to get to where you want to be as long as you do the work and you're consistent.
I think that's perfect. I'll probably clip that. We've been chatting for almost an hour right now. I can't thank you enough for your time. Where can people find you, like, to follow along your journey? Obviously, you still have another few lifetimes ahead of you, and a lot more to ambition and goals to hit. So where can people, follow along?
Yeah, so you guys can follow me on Instagram. It's at Devona Stimpson, my first and last name. Pretty much any platform, it's just my first and last name. If you want to check out my artwork, you can see it on my social media, or artbydevona.com. And then my podcast is Gangstar Creative Podcast. So you can find that on Apple, Google, Spotify, or it's also housed on devonnastimpson.com. So
Super
check
cool.
me out there.
Well, thank you for joining us on An Untold Narrative, episode 33. I really thank you. This was awesome.